What's going on, Bengals fans? The wait is over. Cincinnati finally opened the season with a Week 1 win over the Browns, 17-6. Was it perfect? No. Did luck play a role at times? Absolutely. But a win is a win, and for a team that has often stumbled out of the gate in past years, this feels like a big step forward. Before we dive into the latest overreactions and hot takes, make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of the biggest Bengals news. Now, let's get right into it. The first overreaction I've seen floating around is, the Bengals' offense is cooked. And honestly, that's just way too dramatic. Are we really going to sit here and say Joe Burrow and this stack of weapons can't get it done? Let's give credit where it's due. The Browns' defense is legit. Sometimes you're not going to hang 30 points on a unit like that. Here's a crazy stat. According to ESPN, the Bengals finished with just 7 total yards in the second half, the fewest by a winning team in the last 25 years. Cleveland outgained Cincinnati 327-141 and doubled them up on first downs. That paints an ugly picture, but at the end of the day, the Bengals did what winners do. They protected the football, controlled the clock early, and won the turnover battle 2-0. That's the real difference. So sure, the offense wasn't sharp, but to write off this unit after one tough game? That's just an overreaction. Now let's get to the second overreaction, and this one stings a little. Taylor-Britt might not be the guy. Bengals fans, I know this isn't easy to hear. CTB has shown flashes of potential since he was drafted in the second round back in 2022, but here we are, 3 seasons later, and serious questions remain. Against the Browns, he was targeted 7 times, gave up 6 catches for 76 yards, and posted one of the worst coverage grades on the entire defense, just 36.3 according to PFF. That's not what you expect from a corner who was supposed to develop into a key starter. What makes this even more frustrating is the type of plays he's giving up. It's not just deep shots, he's struggling on quick slants and underneath routes, and then missing opportunities to limit yards after the catch. His average tackle depth was around 15 yards, which means even when he's near the play, the damage is already done. For a defense that prides itself on discipline and making teams earn every yard, that's a glaring weakness. And let's be honest, the Bengals' secondary as a whole looked shaky in that game, but CTB was clearly the one Cleveland targeted over and over. When Joe Flacco, a veteran quarterback, keeps going back to the same matchup, that tells you the defense has a problem it couldn't fix on the fly. So here's the big question, what do the Bengals do from here? Moving off a second-round pick this early isn't something this franchise takes lightly, but if the struggles continue, the front office has to consider their options. Whether it's reducing his role, making adjustments in coverage, or even looking at trade possibilities before the deadline, the decision is coming sooner rather than later. At the end of the day, the Bengals' window to compete is right now. If CTB can't rise to the challenge, this coaching staff has to figure out who can. Overreaction number 3. The Bengals just got lucky. And you know what? That's actually not much of an overreaction at all. Cincinnati did benefit from some fortunate breaks in this game, but that's football. In the NFL, style points don't matter. There's no committee comparing who looked better on the field. All that counts is the scoreboard at the end of the day, and in Week 1, the Bengals had more points than the Browns. That's the only stat that truly matters. Now yes, let's be real, the Browns left points out there. A missed field goal, a missed extra point, those plays could have swung momentum. But here's where the Bengals deserve credit, they capitalized. Cincinnati's defense forced key turnovers at exactly the right moments, and the offense protected the ball. Winning the turnover battle 2-0 is no accident, that's discipline, preparation, and making clutch plays when it matters most. Luck might open the door, but you still have to walk through it. And that's what this Bengals team did. The difference between winning and losing in the NFL is often razor thin, and the good teams are the ones that survive those close calls. If anything, this victory shows growth. In past years, Cincinnati often found ways to lose these scrappy games. This time, they found a way to win. The challenge now is turning that survival mode win into momentum. Use the lucky breaks as fuel, learn from the mistakes, and sharpen the execution heading into Week 2. Because if the Bengals can clean up the inefficiencies and still hold on to the resilience they showed Sunday, those lucky wins can quickly turn into consistent ones. Now here's one I almost can't believe even made it into the conversation. Fire Zac Taylor. Yes, I actually saw Bengals fans posting this on Twitter and even in some live chats. And honestly, this has to be one of the most extreme overreactions of the week. Look, you can question play calling decisions. You can get frustrated with how conservative the offense looked at times. But calling for Taylor's job after a Week 1 win? That's flat out wild. Let's put this in perspective. Zac Taylor has led Cincinnati to back-to-back AFC Championship games and a Super Bowl appearance. He's turned the Bengals from a struggling franchise into a legitimate contender. That doesn't happen by accident, and it certainly doesn't happen with a coach who doesn't know what he's doing. Sure, the Browns' game wasn't a masterpiece. The offensive rhythm was off, the passing attack was limited, and there were stretches where the Bengals looked out of sync. But this is where coaching matters most. Taylor kept the team composed, leaned on the defense, and trusted his guys not to make backbreaking mistakes. That kind of discipline is part of why the Bengals walked away with the win. Could the play calling evolve? Absolutely. Fans want to see Burrow unleashed and the offense firing on all cylinders. But one shaky performance against a very talented Cleveland defense doesn't erase years of progress under Taylor's leadership. If anything, it's a reminder that even elite teams will have ugly games, they just need to find ways to win them. And that's exactly what Cincinnati did. So fire Zac Taylor? Not even close. The Bengals are in the best position they've been in for decades, and Taylor is a massive part of why. Now, I'm not someone who's going to lose my mind over every play-calling decision, but there is one recurring issue with Zac Taylor that continues to frustrate me: the slow play calls. We saw it again in the second half against Cleveland. The Bengals broke the huddle with barely 10 seconds on the play clock. Burrow didn't like the look, and suddenly Cincinnati had no choice but to burn a timeout. Later in the half, it happened again. Another late call, another wasted timeout. By the time the fourth quarter rolled around, the Bengals only had one timeout left, which can absolutely swing a close game in this league. This isn't a brand new problem, either. It popped up last season as well, and it has to be corrected. Getting the play in faster gives Burrow more time at the line of scrimmage to make adjustments, read the defense, and control the tempo. When you're rushing, you limit your quarterback's ability to outsmart the opponent, and with a player like Burrow, that's one of your biggest advantages. That said, let's keep perspective. Being frustrated with late play calls is fair. But saying Zac Taylor should be fired after a Week 1 victory is beyond extreme. The Bengals are 1-0, sitting at the top of the AFC North, and they have plenty of time to iron out these details. Fans can be mad about the clock management, but calling for the coach's job after a game you actually won? That's just an overreaction, plain and simple. And speaking of overreactions, another one floating around is that penalties are still a huge problem for this team. We'll get into that next. Let's move on to the final overreaction. Penalties are still a big problem for the Bengals. Cincinnati finished with 7 penalties for 33 yards against the Browns. On paper, that doesn't sound disastrous, but the timing of those penalties is what made them so costly. 3 of them came on third downs during Cleveland's opening drive, directly extending possessions that should have been over. When you give an opponent like the Browns extra opportunities, you're asking for trouble. Now, not all of those calls were equal. The pass interference looked questionable. The flag on Trey Hendrickson felt soft. He was clearly trying to sweat the ball and caught the quarterback high by accident. Still, in today's NFL, you can't touch a quarterback's helmet, and defenders know officials are going to throw that flag every time. On the flip side, the officiating wasn't consistent either. Joe Burrow took a vicious face mask that twisted his helmet completely around, and somehow the refs, who were standing right there, didn't throw a flag. That no call was as obvious as it gets, and it highlights the frustration players and fans have with uneven officiating. So, are penalties a crisis for the Bengals right now? Not necessarily. Remember, this game was on the road, and Cincinnati averaged about 7 penalties per game away from home last season. In other words, this performance wasn't out of character. The real issue isn't the number of flags, it's the situational impact. Third down penalties that extend drives, momentum killers on offense, or careless fouls that take away big plays. These mistakes are fixable. With discipline, better communication, and more focus, the Bengals can clean this up quickly. But if they don't, these small penalties will eventually cost them in a tight AFC playoff race. For a team with championship ambitions, that margin for error doesn't exist.